Hi everyone, it's Moira Monney with this month's interview on The Successful Linguist, and today I'm very excited to be with Corinne McKay. Corinne, welcome to the call.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for taking the time. So, I don't think there are many translators out there who haven't actually heard of you, but just in case, would you please introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. I'm sure there are lots of people who haven't heard of me, but yeah, I'd be happy to introduce myself. Yeah, I'm an ATA certified French to English translator, and I live in Boulder, Colorado, and which, for those of you on the other side of the Atlantic, is sort of in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, in the west of the U.S.
Right.
Um, Yeah, and I translate mostly international development and legal documents. And I also, a large part of my business is writing books and teaching courses for beginning translators and translators who want to sort of improve their job satisfaction or make more money or just make changes in their business. And I'm also serving a 3 year term on the board of directors of the American Translators Association. And I'm about halfway. By the time this airs, I think it'll be exactly halfway
All right, okay.
um, through that term.
Wow. Wow, and how did you get started in the translation industry? Did you work in a different career beforehand?
I did. Those of you, if you've worked in the US or lived in the US, you probably know it's pretty uncommon for people to go to school for translation here because we don't have that many schools for it. And
Oh,
I had
interesting.
all yeah, I had always been really interested in translation, but I did a bachelor's and master's degree in French. And then I actually worked as a high school French teacher for 8 years
Oh,
before I was a translator. And then when my daughter was born, so now going on 12 years ago, I wanted to find a job where I could work from home and use French. And
mm-hmm.
so I thought I would try doing translation. And here we are. So yes, I was not always a translator. I had a whole completely different career to start out with.
All right. And so, did you find it difficult when you to establish yourself when you first went into this field? I mean, how did you find your first paying clients?
Yeah, I found it very difficult. And
Okay.
that was actually part of the impetus for my book and my online class and things like that. Is that
Right.
I think when I started out, I knew in my heart that I could do the language part of the job because I've always loved to write. And I knew that I had lived in France for a year and I knew that I had, good French language skills.
Uh-huh.
But I had no idea how to run the business side of it. So, for example, I can see in my head an image of myself on the first day that I really thought, okay, I'm going to try this being a translator thing. That I was sitting at my kitchen table with my tiny, tiny daughter laying on my lap. and I and I opened up the yellow pages because in those days we still had, printed phone books in the
Yeah.
US. And I opened up the yellow pages and I literally just started cold calling translation companies in
Right.
Colorado and saying, what do I do if I want to work for you?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I think that's not the worst way you could start. But, I mean, now I think in a sense we do the same thing except online. But just as an example, after the first paying job I ever did, and the client said, okay, send us your invoice. I actually called my husband at work and said, what do you think you put on an invoice?
Oh, really?
And now, I mean, it sounds, it's now I laugh at that too, but you sort of think, well, how would you know? I
What
mean,
true?
I had I had never been a freelancer before. I had only ever had jobs where you got paid a salary and there were no invoices.
Mm.
So yes, it was very hard. I mean, I think it was easier than the way I usually think of it is it was easier than I thought in terms of work volume. Like I'd say certainly even as part-time as I worked when I was first starting out because my daughter was really little,
Mm.
after about a year and a half, which when you think about it in terms of actually starting a business is not that long. I mean,
No,
if you
true.
started, say, a restaurant or, a bookstore or something like that, really after a year and a half, I thought, it's not, this is going to work for me. It's not
Mm-hmm.
worth thinking about, should I go back to having a salaried job? Because there certainly is enough work out there for me. But I found it very difficult in terms of running the business.
Okay, and that's why you then later on wrote your book.
Yes, that's right.
All right. It's a great book, by the way. That's what helped me get
Thanks.
started.
Oh, great. I'm trying to tell this to as many people as possible so that I'll actually do it. I'm hoping to do a third edition in 2014. And now I feel like I've told enough people that I have to do it.
Wow,
So hope-
exciting. Yes.
hopefully there'll be a third edition by this time next year.
Brilliant. Okay. So, can you share with us what you do today to market your services? Do you work mostly with direct clients or with agencies?
Yeah, I still do work with agencies. I don't actively market to agencies anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but for people who, just because I find that now, at least for agencies in the US, the rates that I charge are usually too high for the vast majority of agencies.
Mm-hmm.
So if they find me, I'm happy to talk to them, but I don't actively market to agencies anymore.
Okay.
And I will just put in a plug here that for people who are actively marketing to agencies, I think certainly the best way to find quality agencies to market to is to have a membership to either payment practices or the pros blue board and sort out the agencies that are highly rated that work in your country or culture or language combination. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's certainly better than just looking online and applying to anyone because then you know that the agency is at least somewhat legitimate.
Very true.
um,
Yeah, that's a great
yeah.
tip.
And I should say too, I don't have affiliate deals with either payment practices or the pros blue board. I just think that they're great services. So I think everybody who works with agencies should really have a membership to one or preferably both of those.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, so these days, I have a lot of long-term agency clients who I really enjoy working for because I feel like when I work for them, I just translate, and sometimes that can be a really nice thing.
Okay, yeah.
That I know that if the agency is a high quality one, hopefully you just translate and they handle everything else. And that can
Mm-hmm.
be really kind of liberating sometimes. At the same time, I find that the longer I'm in the industry, now doing this for almost 12 years, the thing I enjoy about working with direct clients is that most of the time you can communicate directly either with the person who wrote the source document or the
Mm-hmm.
person who's going to use the target document. So, the vast majority of my clients are in international development. So, for example, they are international aid agencies that fund development projects in French speaking countries in Africa.
Okay.
So, I translate their, quarterly reports, annual reports, employee performance reviews, a lot of manuals about their procedures and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I find, um, when I have questions about the document, if you're working through an agency, I think it can be really tough to get your in-depth questions answered because you're always kind of playing tag with the agency and the client.
Yes.
And so that part of working with direct clients, I really, really enjoy. And as far as actual marketing strategies, fortunately, in international development, it's pretty easy to find potential clients just
Okay.
because there are, many, many online directories of large international organizations, and you can see if they work in countries that use your languages.
Mm-hmm.
And then I either contact them by email or I actually use postcards. I have marketing postcards that I made on, Vistaprint, just a easy online service that you can customize postcards. I have no graphic design skill whatsoever.
Okay.
So with direct clients, I think I know I'm giving kind of a lengthy answer, but this is a really good question. I
Yes,
think
and it's a brilliant answer.
Well, I think without a doubt, the best way to make contact with direct clients is in person.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, attending conferences that your potential direct clients would be attending, you'll probably be the only translator there.
Yeah.
If
Mm-hmm.
if any of you listen to the podcast that Yves Baudot and I do, I interviewed a translator named Joanne Archambault, who does French to English orthopedics translations. So she translates things like documentation for artificial hips and knees and finger joints. And she basically took her direct client business from nothing to more work than she could handle in about a year by doing
Wow.
just that. Attending conferences for French orthopedic surgeons and orthopedic implant companies and things like that. I mean, for me, I know everyone always has their excuses. For me, because of my family, um, sort of hard. It's traveling by myself for extended periods of time is challenging for me to find the time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do most of my marketing by paper letter or postcard or email or trying to participate in online forums where my potential clients would be. But that's actually one of my professional goals for 2014 is that I'm committed that I'm going to go to at least one international development conference where I could potentially meet some direct clients in person.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. Um, is there a time where you've maybe struggled a bit in your business? Can you share with us what that was like and how you overcame that situation?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say for me, I felt maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe a little longer, because probably when I had been translating for about 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
that my business was sort of at this crossroads where I had kind of reached the top of the agency market, but I was having a really hard time breaking into the direct client market.
Right.
Um, Partially because, and I think you have less of this problem in Europe because it's physically smaller. For example, here, there are very few local direct clients for what I do. I mean, there are some, it's not like there are zero, but whereas, for example, if I lived in Paris,
Yeah.
you're sort of surrounded by direct clients all the time.
Yeah.
Or my fantasy is to move to Switzerland, not really move, but
How is
my
it?
my husband and my daughter are both Swiss citizens, and so we go there, quite a bit because my husband's of Swiss
Ah,
origin.
right.
Yeah, and so so sometimes I think, if I lived in Geneva, it would be so easy because my clients would be, I'd meet clients on the tram and I would meet clients at parties and things like that. But, living in Colorado, you don't meet French international development clients at parties.
Okay, yeah, I
So
see what you
I feel
mean.
like for me it was a real obstacle that I thought, I'm working as much as I can or as much as I want to. I'm sort of at the top of the agency market, and where do I go from here?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like for me, it was sort of a combination of thinking, what are clients who need my language pair, but who have good volumes of content? Because for me, I don't know whether this happens to lots of people, but when I first kind of broke into the direct client market, I had direct clients, but they were sort of clients who needed a press release translated 4 times a year or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was literally, 500 words every 3 months, and you certainly aren't going to make a living off of that.
No.
So that was the first, obstacle for me, was kind of thinking, I need to think of an area that I enjoy translating in and that I want to study more about, but where there are higher volumes of content.
Okay.
So I think I thought a lot about that. And then also for myself, I feel like I needed to think of direct clients who have at least some presence in the US. And this is, we could probably do a whole call about this. I feel like the European business culture is so relationship based, that you have to either be there or be able to go there frequently enough that you build personal relationships with direct clients.
Yeah.
I think in the US, people are relatively receptive to working with someone who they don't know.
Mm.
Maybe they would talk to you on the phone once, or maybe even really just email you. I have one of my bigger direct clients in the US, a large international development agency. I've never even talked to them on the phone,
Right.
and I've done tens of thousands of dollars of work for them.
Uh-huh.
Whereas I feel like in Europe, I mean, you can say, Moira, if you think that's true, but I feel like in Europe, people are much more interested in working with someone who they have an existing relationship or referral for. So I think for me, I also had to think, what are direct clients who need French into English, but who have some business presence in the US?
I think that's a very good point, actually. It does depend on the country. I think, for example, Germans, I would say, are more like that than people in the UK. But
Mhm.
I think yeah, it's a good point. You do need a referral or something at least so that that you can build trust.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And so you're a member of the American Translators Association. Did you decide to become a certified translator straight away, like at the beginning of your career? And why do you think it's so important to become a certified member of an association?
Yeah, I actually did take and pass the ATA exam within the first year that I was translating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and I should say too, just as inspiration for people who are planning on taking it, I failed the practice test.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I failed the practice test. But I could see from looking at it that I thought I could sort of fix the things that had caused me to fail, and I didn't
Okay.
fail by that much. I think for the ATA exam, I believe the cutoff is 17 error points that that's the passing cutoff, and maybe I got, I don't know, 21. It wasn't like I got 50 error
Okay,
points.
yeah.
And then I passed the real test on the first try.
Wow.
So I thought, which I think was correct, that even though that since I didn't have a degree in translation, because my master's is in French literature,
Uh-huh.
since I didn't have a degree in translation and I didn't have much translation experience, that it would sort of motivate clients to maybe take a chance on me rather than some other beginning translator.
Mm-hmm.
And, looking retroactively, I do think that that is true. And I just think, I mean, I usually say, I think that being certified is a big plus, but it's certainly not a must. I mean, there are lots of translators who are very successful and make tons of money translating
Yeah.
who are not certified. Like I always say, look at Chris Durbin. She's probably the most successful freelance translator I know. She's not certified. She doesn't have a blog. She's not on Twitter. I mean, it just goes to show that you can make it as a translator in lots of different ways.
Yeah, very
But
true.
I do think that at least in the US market, if you work for agencies, I do think that there are more agencies who are placing more emphasis on ATA certification, at least. Like I'd say within the past couple of years, certainly more so than before, I'll have agencies contact me and say, we have this project that the client requires an ATA certified translator.
Oh, interesting.
Um, so I'm not sure if that's the case in Europe. The SFT in France doesn't have certification. So, certification it's kind of a, amorphous area because it's not really like the bar exam for lawyers where there's one, standard credential that everybody has to have.
No,
But I
true.
do think if you pass the exam, I think it's a huge plus. And I do think also that I was right that at the start of my career, it was a big help because at least shows that you have some idea what you're doing. I think
Mm-hmm.
when agencies are trying to look at, they always need new translators, so they have to take a chance on somebody, and looking at, which of these people is potentially a good bet and which aren't, that I think at the very least they will try the certified people first.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And can we talk about rates? I loved your blog post on translators who earn $100,000 a year. It was very inspiring. How did you come up with your rates, and what sort of tips can you give to our listeners?
Yeah, well, a few things. I mean, I think first of all, just from the mindset point of view, you have to accept that rates are really stressful, no matter how long you've been in the industry. Because still, for me today, you worry, if I quote too much, I'm not going to get this job. And if
Uh-huh.
I quote too little, then I'm basically leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
If you say $1,500 and the client says, fantastic, can you start it today? You think, oh God. So the things that I always keep in mind are you can always negotiate downward, but you can rarely negotiate upward.
Yes.
Um, so when the client comes back and says, $1,500 or pounds or euros or whatever,
Yeah.
sounds great to us. How soon can you start? You can't say, only kidding. How about 2000? Um, and I sort of think about, if for those of us who came from the world of salaried employment, it's sort of like when you're negotiating the salary for a new job, except you have to do that essentially every day of your working life when you're a freelancer.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the rules I would keep in mind are always start with a slightly higher number than you would be willing to work for, especially if you already have enough work. So this is a strategy that I learned from a translator here in Colorado, Chris Blakesley, who's a Japanese to English translator. And sometimes I joke that the secret to being a really super successful freelance translator is to be named Chris. But this Chris is a man, but he's in the Chris Durbin category, and so I think it maybe some of it is the name. But
That's
anyway,
funny.
so he came from the finance world and translates Japanese to English. And, he
Hmm.
gave me this simple advice, but it makes a lot of sense is the easiest time to raise your rates without feeling stressed about it is when you already have enough work.
Okay.
Because then if you don't get the new client, you're not really out anything. You're already busy enough.
Hmm.
So I think when you get the new client, you try a slightly higher rate and see what happens. And if they accept it, then you know that at least a portion of your target market will bear that new rate. So what I do personally is I always start with a slightly higher rate than I would be willing to work for. And I don't say, and that's negotiable. I say something like, well, my usual fee to translate a document like this would be something in the neighborhood of, $2,200.
Hmm.
But if that's not in your budget, let me know and we can talk about it further.
Okay.
So that isn't saying I'm going to give a discount. That isn't saying I'm going to do it for less.
Yeah.
um, and I think then if the client comes back to you, always try to negotiate on a component of the project other than money. So if the client comes back and says, could you do it for less? You can try to ask for a longer deadline, or you can offer to do it faster for the same amount of money.
Uh-huh.
And then the client feels like they're getting something for free.
That's a very good
I mean,
point.
I
Hmm.
do think you just have to keep in mind that there's a lot of psychology to it. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So, for
Hmm.
example, I enjoy translating books. Oh, sorry
Hmm.
about that.
That's fine.
Um, all of us know that the literary market doesn't pay what the commercial translation market pays. So, what I try to negotiate on is a really long deadline so that I can fit that work in when I'm not doing anything else.
Right. Okay.
So, even taking, 6 months to translate a book, I mean, it took the author a lot longer than that to write it, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Very true.
most of the time. You can't, most authors don't write a book in 6 months. And so it's reasonable that a translator would take longer than that to translate it.
Uh-huh.
So I think leaving room to negotiate downward a little bit, raising your rates when you are really busy,
Hmm.
negotiating on non-monetary factors rather than monetary factors, or even if you work with agencies, I think there are some non-monetary factors you can negotiate on. For
Hmm.
example, having the agency do the formatting on the document, or when you're translating legal or financial documents that have a lot of numbers in them, having the agency input the numbers, because how long does that take?
Yeah.
A
Very true.
really long time, right? When you're
Hmm.
inputting, columns of numbers in a, financial statement or something like that. Maybe the agency can do that with you
Hmm.
or for you. And I think also another thing to keep in mind with rates is you, in general, when you want to make a significant rate increase, I find that you're almost always better off looking for new clients than trying to raise your rates with existing clients.
Yeah.
Because an existing client might go along with a rate increase of, 5% or 10%.
Hmm.
But when you want to make a bigger jump, I think you are almost certainly better off looking for higher paying clients. And I find too, not across the board, but in general, a client's respect for you has a lot to do with how much they pay you.
Yeah.
And I think, when I talk to translators who work with agencies and they say, well, direct client, I would like to work with direct clients, but I think they would be really demanding. And, if they pay you that much, they're really going to, be on your back all the time. And in my case, at least, I find the opposite. That as long as you do a good job for them, that higher paying clients think of you more on the consultant level than on the secretarial
Yeah.
level.
Hmm.
And in general, I won't say that direct clients are not demanding to work for, because I think they are in terms of the quality that they want.
Uh-huh.
But in terms of, I think, trusting your judgment, I would say a client who pays you more when you say, well, here's what I think we should do. Here's this issue with the document, and here's how I think we should handle it. That I think a higher paying client is more likely to trust your judgment.
That's very interesting. I shall try that out in the future.
Yeah, you can use these tips too if you want to,
I
Moira.
will
Even though
do.
you're the host, you can use
I
them.
will certainly. So you run an online course for beginning freelance translators. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So the class I teach right now is called Getting Started as a Freelance Translator. It's a 4 lesson online class, and we do 4 very targeted assignments, which are your resume and cover letter, marketing plan, rates and billable hours sheet, and your online presence. So things like association directory profiles, LinkedIn, Twitter, your website, blog, if you have one, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then every week, I take 10 people in every session. And every week, we also do a question and answer conference call. So people can do that live, or they can email me their questions and then listen to the recording of the conference call.
Okay.
And, so we talk about all, people can ask about anything related to freelancing. So the session, I know we're recording this in January and you'll air it in March. The
Yes.
session, the current session is full, which
Okay.
starts next week. But there is a session starting in April. So I
Right.
can't say I think that there would still be spaces in March if people want to look at my website, translatewrite.com, or if you look at my blog, thoughtsontranslation.com, there's a tab called Books and Courses, and you can get to it from there. And
Okay.
then I'm going to be starting, which hopefully will be going on by the time this interview airs, a sort of next level class called Beyond the Basics of Freelancing.
Oh, are
And so
you?
that, yeah, I've done a pre-conference seminar at the ATA conference twice on that same topic, Beyond the Basics of Freelancing, and it's been really well received. And so I've been saying for a while that I want to start a class on that topic, and I'm finally doing it. The course materials are in progress, and I'm hoping that the session will start in February. And so then I would alternate between the beginner level class and the Beyond the Basics class. And the Beyond the Basics class is just going to focus more on working with higher quality agencies, marketing to direct clients, and sort of increasing your visibility in the translation world. So hopefully that'll be going by the time you listen to this interview.
Wow, that sounds brilliant. So you've also written 2 books and you offer consulting services to other translators. And you just said you're developing another course as well. So how much time do you actually spend working on translations versus your other activities?
I would say as time goes on, I do more other activities.
Okay.
I mean, now at this point, I'd say I probably translate about half the time, and then I spend about half the time working on my books and courses and
Right.
consulting.
Okay.
But the really nice thing, I think, I just wrote a blog post for about and wrapping up at the end of the year, and I was saying, I recently talked to a couple of translators who are retiring. So I'm 42, so they're say 20 to 25 years older than me,
Mm-hmm.
and they both said, I'm not sick of translating. I'm sick of deadlines and rush jobs.
Right.
And I sort of think the thing that I really like as I get older about about writing books and teaching classes is that it's not, deadline rush jobs with deadlines. And so that part of it, I think I'll always love translating because I love the writing aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that too, that I really enjoy doing work that is not necessarily no deadline, but it's a little less deadline driven than, translating for clients. But I still love translating for clients. So.
Yeah, right. And so what do you do if you've received too much work, if there is such a thing? Do you ever subcontract projects?
Yeah, I would say and going back to the differences between agencies and direct clients, I do really, really try to never turn down work from my direct clients.
Okay.
Um, because for some of them, I'm the only French to English translator they have. Some I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're not, it's a better situation. But some of my direct clients, I am their only translator. So in my language pair, so I really try not to turn down work from them.
Okay, yeah.
I'm very fortunate that I have a wonderful translation partner, Yves Baudeux, who I host our Speaking of Translation podcast with also.
Mm-hmm.
And so she and I share work if one of us is overloaded. So the first thing I would do was call her. I mean, I do think with my agency clients, I don't worry too much about turning down work because undoubtedly I'm not the only French to English person they have. Let's hope.
Well, it would make sense, yes.
Yeah. And so with agency clients, I think, I try not to turn them down habitually, but I don't, stress out too much if I need to turn them down once in a while, or even a good, percentage of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that I would do is contact Eve and see if we can, somehow work it out between the two of us. I rarely subcontract work, other than to people who I work with regularly, just because I find it stressful to worry about, is the other person going to follow through? Are they going to be late? Is the quality of the work going to be what I would do? So, and I
Uh-huh.
certainly never do that without telling a client, and I would say I will generally overwork myself before I will turn down work from a direct client. That I think, I take a generous amount of vacation for US. I mean, probably for Europeans, it's normal, 6 weeks or something like that. That I usually take, 3 or 4 weeks in the summer and then 2 weeks over the winter holidays. But I think, that's kind of the price I pay for my 6 weeks off is that, sometimes I'm working more than I want to be, but I try not to, be in that mode constantly.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. So, one last question before we wrap up. Could you share with us the most important lesson you learned sort of along the way, or something that you would have liked to know at the beginning of your translation career?
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of hard to pick one thing, so I'll say a couple of things.
Okay.
So, one thing I would say I'll tell you something that I'll say for beginners, and then something I recently learned as a beginner in another area.
Oh, brilliant.
So,
Okay.
so for beginners, I would say the translation industry is huge and is growing all the time, and the work is out there if you look for it.
Yes.
And I know this is something I feel like I've repeated this on every social media forum that I'm on. So hopefully people haven't heard it too many times before, I think.
I think you can
Um,
never hear it enough, actually.
yeah, there is lots of well-paying work out there for what you like to do if
Hmm.
you go and look for it. But the point is, most people don't go look for it. They wait for it to find them. And in the meantime, they complain. And this includes me. This includes me.
Okay.
And in the meantime, they complain that either they don't have enough work or the work is not interesting or they're not making enough money.
Hmm.
And that's sort of when I was talking about kind of the crossroads that I feel like my business was at, 5 or 6 years ago, that's kind of where I was. you
Right.
know, that when you say to yourself, honestly, how many new potential clients did you contact last year? And I bet you anything, a lot of translators would say zero, that they
Really?
did not
Okay.
that they did not do any outbound marketing. So yeah, I think for beginners, that's what I would say. The well-paying work is out there, and actually, there are clients out there looking for someone like you. when I did the interview with Joanne Archambault, the French orthopedics translator,
Mm-hmm.
she said that more than one of the orthopedics companies that she worked with even said to her, we always wondered if there was someone like you out there.
Really?
But yeah, but we didn't have time to go find you. So we just hired a general medical translation company, and the translations were okay, but they were nothing great.
Oh,
It
wow.
wasn't, yeah. So, right. So for beginners, that's what I would say. The well-paying work is out there. You just have to go find it. And keep in mind, most people are not going to go find it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're going to wait for it to find them. And meanwhile, they're going to think, I don't make enough money. This work is boring. Things like that. And then now here's something that it's to me, it was sort of really simple, but really profound. I feel like I'm kind of into things that are simple, but profound, or they're profound to me, and maybe other people just find them simple.
And the profound things always simple.
Right, yeah. So if you read my blog, you know that I recently started learning to play the lute.
Uh-huh.
Um, I had an idea that I wanted to learn to play a new musical instrument, and then we went to a lute concert, and I just fell in love with this instrument and thought, I have to learn. This is my goal for this year is to learn how to play the lute. So I was talking to a translator friend who's a very accomplished musician,
Uh-huh.
um, and I said to her, "Do you think this is crazy? Am I nuts for wanting to learn to play the lute?" And she said, "Think of it this way. Everyone who plays an instrument was a beginner one day.
Mm-hmm.
you know, Even the most accomplished musicians in the world once picked up that instrument for the first time and just tried playing it and played, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star,
Yeah.
whatever it was. And that was something that, even though it's simple, it really resonated with me. That when I helped out with the newcomers presentation at the ATA conference this year, which is for people who are attending for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to them, every person at this conference, even the president of ATA, once came to this conference for the first time and walked into a room of 2,000 people who they didn't know and thought, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
So I think that's something now that I sort of use to, motivate myself to try new things is that you think, even people who are the leaders of countries,
Yeah.
once walked into the first political job that they ever had and just said, let me see if I'm any good at this. And
Yeah.
now they're, Obama or Angela Merkel or whoever, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, and that's something that I think, right, it's really simple, but I think it's very inspiring to think if all those people can do it, why not you?
That
If that's what I said to the people at the ATA conference, if all of the people who are sitting on the stage as the board of directors today can do this, why not you?
yeah,
So,
that is very inspiring.
yeah,
Wow. Okay, thank you very much.
sure.
Thank you for taking the time, and it was brilliant to listen to all your tips and insight. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you so much for asking me.
so, if you would like to check out Corinne's superb blog, the link is below this audio. And if you please leave a comment and share with us one lesson that you learned from this interview.
Oh, great. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'll see you next time on The Successful Linguist.
Great. Thanks, Moira.
Thank you, Corinne. Bye.
Bye.